Hello, it's Geraldine, Living Water Quilter and BERNINA Ambassador. We're going to stitch some echoes. And the echoes give us this beautiful shape based on, I say, the letter U. If you look at it, it's a letter U. But either way, it's echoes, and they're half-inch echoes. Echoes basically repeat a shape, and we change the distance between the echoes to our desired distance. It could be a quarter inch away, half inch, a whole inch, or more. For purposes of practice and learning, we're going to use a half inch. Let's take a look at our echo design. Again, we're using the straight edge ruler and we're using a 5-inch square. So mark a 5-inch square on your quilt sandwich, and then you're going to, and we're going to show this in the video, but I want to show you ahead of time what you will see. I'm going to stitch all the way around the 5-inch square, and I'm going to try and stitch right on top of the line. Now, if you don't stitch on top of the line, don't worry, it's okay. This is practice, remember? This is where we use our mistakes or the different things that we do to help us to improve the next time around. Remember, this is for learning. Now, stitching all the way around the 5-inch square, and then we're going to use the lines on the ruler to help us make the design without marking. We don't have to mark each one of these lines to stitch. We use the ruler. In the center of the ruler, we have some marks. Do you see these vertical marks? These are a quarter inch apart. They're going to help us position the foot and the needle so that we can have a half-inch distance in between each of these echoes. And how do we do that? Once we go all the way around and we want to stitch the next echo, and we know we want it to be a half an inch, our needle is down here. We need to reposition the needle a half inch over so that we can then stitch the next stitching, right? How do we do that? We use the lines on the ruler. Our needle has stitched down this side. We want to move it over here. All we have to do is reposition our ruler using the marks on the ruler. When we go one over, that's a quarter inch. Another over is a half inch. We want a half-inch distance. So this first line is going to be in line with what we previously stitched. Then we know if we go 1, 2, bring the needle position right here, which is a half inch. And we know that because we're using the lines on the ruler. Once the needle's in the right position, all we have to do is rotate the ruler, this first vertical line on top of our previous line of stitching. Once we put that on top, that helps it to keep our stitching straight. Now you can see the quarter inch distance between the edge of the ruler and the stitching line. Our foot is here and we're going to stitch and we're going to stop a half inch away. How do we know it's a half inch away? We use the lines on the ruler again. Once we get close to the top, we want to shift our ruler until the first line on the ruler is on this line that we stitched. We know that when we do that and we count 1, 2 ticks down, that's a half inch. That's where our needle will stop, right there. All right, let's take a look. Let's watch the video. Hopefully that will make more sense. And guess what? You can replay this video over and over again until you understand how we're using the marks on the ruler so we don't have to mark the quilt sandwich. These marks are a quarter inch apart, and we can position our needle the distance we want for a 1/4 inch echo, a 1/2 inch echo, 3/4 of an inch, a whole inch, etc. It's up to us, but we can use the lines on the ruler. Let's look at the video. So here's the video. It's going to show you me using the spacing gauge. Remember that 1/4 inch distance. It's helping me to stitch it right on top of the line that I marked on the quilt sandwich. I marked a 5-inch square, and I'm going to stitch right on top of the line. This is a good way to practice your foot position and using the spacing gauge. And remember, it's practice. If you're not exactly on top of the line, that's okay. This is a line that's going to brush away, iron away. No one's going to know the difference. Practice stitching on top of the line. Now I want to show you something here that's unique to the ruler. I'm going to stop the video. On the edge of this ruler on both sides, whether it is the round side or the pointed side, let me go back to my other position, my overhead camera position. The edge of this ruler right here is a 1/4 inch away from the edge of this long line, this long edge, a 1/4 inch away, which means that's your needle position. The same thing on this side. The edge of this part of the ruler is a 1/4 inch away from here. So that means as I'm stitching, or as we are stitching, I know that when I line this up, let me move this out of the way here, on top of previous stitching, here's my 1/4 inch distance between the edge of the ruler and what I stitched. If I want my needle to end right here, I know where it's going to end because this edge of the ruler is a 1/4 inch away from this edge. So I can use the spacing gauge, or I can use this edge of the ruler to determine where the needle position will be when I get down to this part of the square. And you can do that with both sides. This will tell me the needle position because this is a 1/4 inch away. Always remember, when we're using a 1/2 inch diameter foot and the needle is in the center, when it is against the ruler, we're stitching a 1/4 inch away. So we can use the edges of the ruler, this edge, remembering that this edge is a 1/4 inch away from here. This edge is a 1/4 away from here, a 1/4 of an inch. And the same thing on these two sides, a 1/4 inch away. And that is our needle position. That is where we're going to stitch. So let's go back to the video and you can see that in action, how I'm using that. So it started from the beginning, which is okay. Let's watch how I use the spacing gauge and the ruler, the edges of the ruler, the 1/4 inch distance that I just showed you, how to position the ruler so I can stitch on top of the line I marked on my quilt sandwich. So I've come to the corner. Now I'm going to turn it around, and again I'm going to use the spacing gauge to make sure the ruler is straight and not tilted or in any one direction. Now I'm sliding up the ruler and I'm using the edge of that curve, which is a 1/4 inch away, and I'm lining it up with the line I marked on my sandwich. That helps me determine that 1/4 inch distance. Now, out of camera view, I've brought the ruler back down so that I can stitch continuously, and you're going to see that I positioned it with the edge right there. I can do that with the spacing gauge or with the edge, the outer edge, to stitch right on top of the line I marked on my quilt sandwich. So this is our first time doing a square using the spacing gauge, and now I want that 1/2 inch distance. So I'm bringing in my stiletto, I'm counting that 1/2 inch. I want to line up the first line with the needle. So you see the first line, I'm showing you with the stiletto, I'm lining it up with the needle. I want to travel a 1/2 inch, put the needle a 1/2 inch away from its current position, and I'm using the ruler to do that. Once I line up the needle to that position, now I'm a 1/2 inch away. That means the first etched line, which I'm showing you there with the stiletto, should line up with the previous line of stitching. I'm going to put it right on top. So I'm putting it on top, and that will help me stitch a 1/2 inch away from that first line of stitching without marking my quilt sandwich. Now I want to make sure that I stop at a 1/2 inch from that line of stitching at the bottom. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to put the line on the ruler, any one of those lines. Then I want to make sure that it's 2 lines away from the line that's lining up. So there's the second line, and that's where I'm going to stop the needle. That will give me my 1/2 inch distance. And if I'm off a stitch or two, I can always go back 1 stitch or go up 1 stitch. Because sometimes, depending upon which way you look at it, how you turn your head, you might be off a stitch or two. And that's okay. Just adjust. Just make sure you stop well ahead so that you can adjust the ruler so that you then can put the needle in the right position. Did you notice how I did that? So I'm putting that first long vertical line on top of the previous stitching. Now I'm going to stitch down, but I'm going to stop just before, and I'm going to repeat it over and over until I come to the center and produce 1/2 inch echoes throughout the pattern. Notice that I'm doing a letter U-shaped echo. I'm not doing the echo at the very top. Notice that. I'm going up and over, and again, always double checking and repositioning the ruler to make sure I stop a 1/2 inch before the previous line of stitching. So I'm lining it up. I know now where I need to stop, and that's where I'll stop the needle before I reposition the ruler. It's a 1/2 inch away from the needle position is a 1/2 inch away, and now I know I can stitch because it's a 1/2 inch away. Again, I'm stopping beforehand, lining up the lines in the ruler, knowing where I need to stop the needle position. Once I stop there, then I can continue the stitch. And you just repeat. And it could be a 1/2 inch, a 1/4 inch, a full inch. You decide how you want to stitch your echoes. And echoes, of course, can be an echo of a square, echo of a triangle. You decide what type of echo shape you want. This is another good way to practice your ruler technique for accuracy, for ruler positioning, for how to move across the surface of a quilt. This is a fantastic way to improve your ruler quilting technique. And notice how I'm no longer using the stiletto. I'm just using the ruler to stitch. I'm not marking anything. How many of us have spent hours marking our quilt only for it to disappear? And now with a ruler and knowing how to read the lines in the ruler, we can make beautiful designs like this echo design quickly and easily. What do you think? If this seems like it went a little fast, don't worry. You can always repeat, stop the video, rewind, and watch it again and again and practice. That's why I've given you small quilt sandwiches. You can do most of these after you watch the video, which I recommend. Watch the video first without stitching, so you know exactly which direction we're going to go. Get it solidified in your mind how you're going to start. Then watch it a second time. Then on the third time, then you should start stitching. That's my recommendation. You start when you're ready, but I recommend you at least watch it once before you start stitching. Now that you've practiced echo quilting with a ruler, using the lines on the ruler to minimize how much you have to mark a quilt sandwich, think about the amount of time you will save because you don't have to mark, because you've used the lines on the ruler. Now take this technique and stitch it across multiple rows and multiple blocks. Start with a whole cloth, half of a fat quarter like you see here. You can vary the distance from a ½ inch to a full inch or anything in between. You could also have a ½ inch, a quarter inch, a full inch, all in one area. You can vary the echoes within a quilt block. It's up to you. Have fun with this design. I'd love to see what you've created and how you've added your own personal touch to this echo design.